Sounds like Kansas might have some real interest in Luca Skoric, an international wing who could bring some pop at 6'9" for KU. We'll break down what it means, what's going on, and how he would fit in with KU on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers. Catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the show. We need to get that subscribers up to 4K for the start of football season. Let's do it. Let's make that the goal. Luca Skoric is an interesting international player, somebody who could maybe bring some size, some versatility, another wing on a roster that doesn't have a ton of wings for KU, and sounds like there's some real interest there. At least it's being reported that way online. So we'll get to all that. His scouting report, potential fit with KU, all that and more on today's episode of the show. Let's start with what is the news here on Luca Skoric. So this might be one, if you remember, over the course of the offseason, we talked about this, I don't know, it feels like months ago at this point in time. There's a tweet from Jake Lieberman, who covers, kind of college basketball, high school recruiting, that sort of thing. And he tweeted out, again, this was a little bit ago, a pair of 6'9" high major Croatian prospects, Luca Skoric and Ivan Bogdanovic, top the available college bowl programs heavily involved are Kansas, Cincinnati, UConn, St. John's, and Virginia Tech. And so that was a while ago, and we talked about that a little bit, and we broke down some of their games a little bit more. But then it kind of went quiet. Then things kind of, cooled down on all fronts, and there wasn't anything. And then all of a sudden this happened from Arman Jovic about, I don't know, a week ago, something like that. And Arman Jovic is does good scouting work on the international scene. Really good stuff there. Highly recommend giving him a follow on social media. And he tweeted that 6'9" wing Luca Skoric is exploring the NCAA route, according to a source. He averaged 5.6 points per game in the ABA this past season at 21 years old, while shooting 42% from three. He's heard from a few high majors, including Kansas, Pitt, and West Virginia. And so that being a little bit closer was like, okay, that makes things interesting. Now, you see those three schools that are on there, and this goes back in line with the idea when you see some of these lists that pop up on social media, you never know exactly what is what. Did Kansas reach out to him, 2 months ago? And so, yes, they did reach out to them, and at one point maybe had interest, and maybe they're not as interested anymore because they got Cole Rosario, and maybe they just don't have the funding to make it work NIL-wise. Are they still reaching out? Are they still making it happen? And the same goes for those other schools with Pitt and West Virginia, right? Is one further along than the others? Is one they reached out in the past, but they're not interested anymore? Did one just reach out just to gauge interest, but isn't really all that interested themselves? It's difficult to tell where exactly everything is on the list there. But then we get this tweet, which was on Wednesday, again, coming from Jake Lieberman. Luca Skoric is down the line with Pittsburgh, but is reconsidering, according to a source. Kansas, West Virginia, amongst others, are involved. Game-changing prospect. So that becomes very interesting there that you're talking about Skoric now. Again, you hear Kansas mention in this. Again, you see them involved with Pittsburgh and West Virginia. Seems like those are the competition. Maybe the idea here would be that West Virginia would be the one, to beat if they keep coming up. Again, he said Pittsburgh was kind of further along, but the fact you get West Virginia in there again when he's saying he's reconsidering, I don't know, maybe that's the one, or maybe he's reconsidering because of Kansas possibly, right? But you do keep getting the name brought up. And even if it is something where it's like, okay, this isn't something that's actually going to happen, but they're just being brought up to raise the bidding, or they, again, were interested in the past, but not anymore. But again, it sounds better on the list to have them there. That is interesting. But certainly we do know that Kansas has 2 scholarships open now, right? After Noah Shelby transferred away, Kansas had a scholarship open to begin with. Now they have 2, and they don't have to use them. 12 scholarship players should be enough to get you through the season, barring, catastrophic mass numbers of injury. But they have the opportunity. The big question kind of just becomes for Kansas, do you have the money? Do you have the funds to make it happen? How much NIL, how much rev share do you have left to make something like this happen? And then the question becomes okay, what is Luca Skoric getting to play overseas? What is he getting to play, in the Croatian league, right? Are you making 6 figures as a 21-year-old? Are you making 80,000? Because if that's the case, if you're, not, if you're making 100,000, you're making 70,000. I don't know that Kansas can offer $1 million, but could they offer 200,000-300,000, double or triple your salary? Maybe that's something that is possible. So it does become interesting and where exactly Kansas is kind of on this list. Now, who is Skoritch? He's a 6'9". He is, I guess, now a 22-year-old. He was born February 1st, 2003. So essentially would be the age of like a senior in college. And he started playing professionally at 19 years old for GKK Sabank, which is part of the A1 League. And the A1 League is the Croatian top league, I guess. And so the Croatian League, it's, again, you're playing professionally, you're playing against other adults, but it's not quite the best league in the world either. Now, what's interesting about, I guess, playing in the Croatian League is you also get to play games in like the Adriatic League, I believe. So like, and I don't know if this is because I don't know if the A1 League is like the junior league or how it works, but the Adriatic League is the one that is like a combination of not just Croatia, but a lot of the Baltic regions. And that becomes a much better league, the Adriatic League, than the Croatian League specifically. Now, in this Croatian League, his first year with GKK Sabank, he plays 24 minutes per game, 8.2 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.4 blocks on 42% from the field, 30% from three, and 79% of the foul line. But that was in the 22 to 23 season. So it's like, how much can we take from that? Then the 2023 to 2024 season, again with GKK Sabank. He plays in the Croatian League only, 27 games played, 27 minutes per game, 13.3 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists per game, with 0.9 steals, 0.3 blocks on 55% from the field, 47 from three, and 79% at the foul line. So pretty impressive there. But again, I think the A1 League, I think that's the top league in Croatia. I just think that's your only playing in Croatia, not against the rest of the countries. So then he moves up. I guess he gets, I don't know, bought or promoted, transferred, whatever you want to call it with international basketball, to KK Sabona, which is a higher up team, I guess you would say, a bigger team, a better team in the league. And they're not just playing in the A1 League, the Croatian League. They're also playing in Liga ABA, the Adriatic League, which is the better league, right? I hope this is making sense and not sounding like word salad. Anyway, in the Croatian only games, he plays 35 games. He starts 11 with 17 minutes per game, 5.5 points per game, 45% from the floor, only 25% from three, 74% at the foul line, 2.9 rebounds per game, 1.2 assists per game, 0.7 steals, 0.2 blocks per game, 2.7 fouls per game. That's a lot for a wing in 17 minutes per game. But in the games against the better competition, against the Adriatic League, he plays 22 games, 6 starts, 14 minutes per game. He 5.4 points per game, 47% from the field, 40% from three, 93% at the foul line. Again, a bit more limited volume there, but 2 rebounds per game, 1 assist. And total it all up between the two leagues, between playing in Croatia and playing in the Adriatic League, 57 games played. So you're talking about somebody who, would be well seasoned and weathered coming in the college game. He'd be like, oh, this is a breeze. We only have to play 35, 40 games. But 5.4 points per game overall on 46% from the field, 30% from three, and 80% at the foul line. So I think an interesting player here, and obviously he's a little bit older. He's obviously somebody who has shown flashes of shooting the basketball. It's been a little bit inconsistent. Again, you go back to when he was 19 years old, when he was playing in the Croatian League for GKK Sabank, you're looking at closer to 30% from three on 3.5 attempts per game. Then you go back to the 2023 to 2024 season and he shoots 47% from three on 3.2 attempts per game. And then you look at this season where in the Croatian League, he only shoots 25% from three, but in the Adriatic League, he shoots 40% from three. That becomes maybe the most interesting skill for me about what is he going to bring to the table, right? Because if he's a good 3-point shooter, if Kansas were to bring him on, like, he's probably playing a role as a 6'9" wing who can shoot the three well. But if he's not, then it's like, okay, maybe that role becomes a little bit more difficult to find with Bill Self and Kansas. So I want to get into a little bit on what his highlights show and how exactly he would fit in with KU. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. You can get in on action with the Open starting up, early morning golf if you're up early like I am when you've got a kid, you're looking for something to post on there, and boom, I got the Open. I can fire a couple bets here or there and see just some random guy end up winning the event that I didn't bet on. But it's fun. It adds to the entertainment. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get podcasts, including on our YouTube page. And don't forget to make Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. Okay, so what does Luca Skoric bring to the table? Went over some of his stats there, and I think what you end up seeing from some of those stats is a guy who, again, inconsistent three-point shooter, but does have that potential in him, has potential to be a solid rebounder, has good size at 6'9", decent assist numbers for kind of being a 3-4 type of player, and obviously a very good free throw shooter as well, is what the stats show you. In watching some of the highlights, looks like he can spot up and shoot on the spot up pretty well. At times, shows a bit of a low dip in his release, which maybe that can hamper him getting off shots in other ways. Like if you have a slower release, you tend to be more of a spot up shooter. Whereas like the guys who are working off ball screens, who are getting threes off in a myriad of ways, tend to have quicker releases for the most part. So maybe that limits you a little bit, at least in a first year with Kansas. But he can make them contested at times. He can make them a bit further back, so he does have some extra range there. And he can also work off the dribble a little bit to attack a closeout, on a spot up too. So, if somebody tries to chase him off the 3-point line, like he knows how to attack off of that and drive all the way to the rim. Nice post game, actually. Nice post game off a pivot foot. Like it's almost like you would think the stereotype of like international European basketball players that like, oh, they're going to be, really well drilled. They're going to have good footwork, good post moves, like good work off the pivot foot, stuff like that. And he kind of shows that. He shows good ball fakes, good shakes, good turns. I think he has a good idea of where to be off the ball and knows when to cut, knows where to cut, and is ready to receive on the cut. So he's a good off-ball player, which I think if you're coming to a school, like if Kansas were to bring him on, he's going to be a role player. You're going to have to be able to play without the ball. I think he shows the ability between the shooting and the cutting to be able to do both of those things. I wouldn't call him the biggest vertical leaper. Like I don't think he's a plus athlete leaping wise, but he does move well in transition, right? And if you're playing him at the 4, he will move well compared to other like power forwards up and down. I think more of like the Jalen Wilson style in terms of being able to like move. Like Jalen was a good athlete in terms of running up and down the floor. He could grab and go, he could work in transition, but Jalen was not a good vertical athlete, if that makes sense. And I think that type of play, I'm not saying he is Jalen Wilson but just in terms of that style of athleticism, right? And he did have a few dunk highlights on there. So it is a capability, just not something that I'd call a strength necessarily. And definitely in that same vein, someone who can grab and go in transition, like Jalen could. Like he is somebody who will grab a rebound and he'll be able to go in transition, or give it off to somebody and then sprint down the court and maybe get an easy bucket because of it. I mentioned some of the passing numbers, the assist numbers. Like he's been a guy who's averaging over assist, and in the season where he played 27 minutes per game, almost 2 assists per game. He's not Magic Johnson out there. He's not DeJuan Harris as a passer, but the ball definitely won't stick with him. He'll find the open man, which is kind of a nice plus skill that he has. And so I think you look at the possible fit with KU, like what he would add to the table, obviously adding another wing. Kansas doesn't have a ton of wings, true wings on this roster, right? It's like Smeeze Calderon, Trey White, and that's it. Like you're going to get guards playing the 3 where they're basically like a wing. Jaden Dawson and Cole Rosario are going to be used like wings, but both those guys are, more in the traditional sense, like shooting guards that are going to play the 3. And that's fine in modern basketball. It's not like a huge deal, but it'd be nice to have different options and flexibility depending on who you're guarding, depending on your matchup, and depending on what works best for you as a specific team. It would give you more length. It would give you more transition play. He fits into both those things, adding positional length and stuff. I think he would add more rebounding to the team. So I went and looked. He had a 4.8% offensive rebound rate, What does that mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. That would have been the best of KU non-big men last season. So the only players on Kansas last season that had better than a 4.8% offensive rebound rate, Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, and Flory Badunga, all big men, right? And it's not necessarily congruent to say his offensive rebound rate is the same as the guys at Kansas because Kansas playing in the Big 12. And I don't know, like, what does the level of competition compare to? The Croatian League, probably worse than the Big 12. Maybe the Adriatic League is on par or better than the Big 12. I don't know, right? 15.5% defensive rebound rate, though, for him. That would have been third best on KU last year, only behind Hunter Dickinson and Flory Badunga. And those are centers. Again, Skoritch is more of a 3-4 type forward wing type. So good rebounder. He would also have shooting potential. Like I said, it's streaky, it's inconsistent, kind of similar to Cole Rosario, but that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have because then you could basically say, hey, Cole Rosario, launch up a couple threes. Okay, you're not feeling it today. Skoritch, you come in. Okay, you hit a couple threes. You stay in a little longer. Or Skoritch, you come in today. Oh, you didn't hit your threes. Okay, Rosario's turn. Oh, you hit your threes. You're staying in a little bit longer, right? Maybe you could kind of mix and match it that way in a little bit. Now, what he wouldn't add necessarily, I don't think he'd certainly be a rotation guy. I think if he were to come in, especially by coming in late, you would view him in the same lens of like Cole Rosario and Samis Calderon and some of these guys who are competing for, are they going to be in the rotation or are they not? Are they going to play, 15, 20 minutes per game? Are they going to play spot minutes, right? Kind of becomes difficult. I also do have questions like, what is the level of defense? You don't really pick that up from the highlights. And I'm not saying he can't do it or he's not a good one. I just have no idea, to be completely honest. Like, I don't know. And just in general, like, what is the jump in competition for him? Is there a jump in competition? How does that affect things? Now, I do think it helps that, he is 22 years old. So like he would be a more mature, experienced basketball player who's played a lot of basketball games at professional level. Like that probably helps. But yeah, what is the level of jump in competition? So I do think if Kansas were to add Luca Skoric, he'd be competing with Samis Calderon, first of all, for who is your top kind of wing off the bench. And I think in the same way, I view Calderon as a 3-4. That's the same way I view Luca Skoric. He'd be a 3-4. So that'd be a direct competition and a very interesting one because Calderon is your incredible athlete. Skoric is maybe more of your feel type of player, right? And then if you can beat out Calderon or if Calderon beats out you, whichever guy wins out on that, it's kind of a competition for who is the eighth man between that player, Rosario, and Tiller. So that's kind of where you're looking at with the possible role. Now, if he does come in and he's a 40% three-point shooter, he's probably for sure in the rotation at that point in time. So I think the ceiling there would be he's a rotation guy who's having a positive impact. The floor is he's playing spot minutes, right? Now, I don't know what it means eligibility-wise that he is 22 years old. Would he come in and be deemed a senior? Would he come in and be deemed a junior? Because if you're bringing somebody on who would be deemed a senior and it's like, oh, I think they'll be in the rotation, but I'm not 100% sure. It's like, okay, wouldn't it be nicer to have somebody who, if they are going to be a fringe rotation player, they have multiple years so that you can at least be like, okay, but we're developing him this year for the next possible season. I think he'd have a couple years left to play. I think he'd probably be deemed a junior because they do allow that gap year. And I thought Paul Mbio was going to be deemed at least a sophomore, and he was deemed a freshman. So who knows? I think part of it too is have you been getting paid professionally? And that kind of matters into all of it too. But I think overall this is still a take. And it's like we're at a point this year, KU has 2 open scholarships. If you can afford it, that's always the big, but right. If you can afford it, why not? You have 2 open scholarships. It adds more competition. It gives you more depth. It gives you the potential for more shooting. But if it's going to cause headaches to move stuff around, if it's not within the budget, then I get it. And I think it'd be cool that he is a very different player than Calderon to give you kind of different backup wing looks if you kind of need it in a certain situation. And I do think there is some potential there for this kid to be a real player, maybe in his second year in college and at least be like a contributor in year 1 at the collegiate game. All right, we're going to finish up here. The EA Sports College Football 26 game is out and they rated the KU roster as you would expect. I'm going to go through some of the top rated players and I think who's too high, who's too low. We'll get to that next. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And again, don't forget to check out Locked on College Football as well. So College Football 26, the video game, is officially out. And if you missed it, the top 10 rated players for KU. Bryce Foster's number one. He is a 89 overall. So really high respect for Bryce Foster, as you'd imagine. Dean Miller was given an 87 rating, along with Jalen Daniels. That puts him in a tie for second at 87. Daniel Highshaw and LaShawn Williams tied at that point for fourth with an 85 each for both your running backs. And then 6 through 10, DJ Graham and Kobe Baines tied with an 83, so corner and guard there. Leif Marjan, the kicker that you brought on from South Alabama, DJ Withers, both given 82s, and then Tommy Dunn, your other defensive tackle, was given an 80. So those are the top 10 rated for KU. I did also think it was interesting that the fastest player they gave to Bryson Hayes, the incoming freshman from the state of Kansas for KU. He's a 95 in speed. Emmanuel Henderson second on the team with a 92. So players that I think are too high, players that I think are too low on this list. So with the too high, I'm going to start here. I think this guy could be a stud down the line, but they have David McComb as a 74. And it's not like again, I think David McComb could end up being a stud for KU. But you look at how the rest of the quarterback roster is. Isaiah Marshall, I think, was like a 71, and Cole Ballard was like a 65, which I think, Cole Ballard should be higher. He's in his, third or fourth year with KU. He's had some game experience. Like, he might be beating those guys out, which, yes, maybe it gives you some questions about those guys, but it also tells you that Ballard is performing well. I think Ballard should be rated higher. But point being, Ballard might be your backup right now, so McComb shouldn't be rated 9 points higher than Ballard, I guess would be the answer there, even though I am very high on the long-term potential of David McComb. I don't know that I would have LaShawn Williams as the fifth best player, tied fourth best player on KU with an 85, right? He had solid production at Iowa. I would have him probably closer to like a low 80s, to be clear. And then I don't know, with like Jackson Cook being a 73, you look at some of the receivers on KU, like, again, in the too low column, Doug Emelian is a 67. I don't know, like Emelian should be rated higher than Jackson Cook. Also, Dean Miller, 87. I would have him again, like lower 80s. I know he had the 6 sacks. I know he was second team all Big 12, but if you look at like the pressure rates, you look at some of the run defense stuff, like, I don't know, 87 to me feels like a very high rating. And I love Dean Miller. He's from my neck of the woods and College of the Canyons, but I think closer to probably 83 or 84 for me, but maybe he does break out to that this year. Some guys that are probably too low. I mentioned Emelian and Ballard. I think Keaton Kubeka too low at a 66 as well. That's another guy that probably should be at least in the low 70s. Blake Harreld is a 77. I think he should be closer to where Tommy Dunn is as an 80. I think he's been really good for KU last year and should get even better as he was a young player. And then the other guy, which like this one, I understand why Emmanuel Henderson's a 79. He doesn't have a ton of collegiate production. So, being a high 70s, like that's not a bad rating at all, given, where he's kind of been. But if you're making me guess, like, is he going to finish there? Is he going to finish rated higher? I feel very good that he's going to finish in the 80s based on the season that he could possibly have, right? As long as he can stay healthy and stuff, I think he's going to have a monster season for KU as a receiver. So I think he'll finish a little higher than that. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the show with Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. And we'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.